After years and years of waiting, we finally got to see a little bit of what Dragon Age: The Veilguard has to offer.
I believe her.
And one of the key parts of any Dragon Age game is going to be the companions. And we had those companions revealed recently in what I will charitably call a poorly marketed trailer that looked like a hero shooter in a age where we have way too many hero shooters coming out.
We're going into the Fade, aren't we?
But it was followed by a gameplay trailer with a much more thunderous ending. But there's still a lot we don't know about this game, and much of that will be revealed over the coming weeks and months before we get our hands on it in fall of 2024. But one part we've gotten quite a bit of information about so far are the companions. First, there will be 7 total, with the option to take 2 with you at any time. Though, as we saw in the gameplay reveal, there will likely be different occasions where you are accompanied by more than just the 2 companions. And yes, the 2 companions with you at any time does mean you'll have 1 less companion with you at any given time than in previous Dragon Age games. You also have a smaller number of total characters, but there's some hope that with the smaller number, that means some really interesting and well thought out stories for each character. Those 7 companions include a returning fan favorite in Harding and 6 new faces. Although a couple of them you may have already seen if you were a really big fan of Dragon Age and saw it in other media. Each companion will have their own personalities, individual skill trees, and specialized gear for team progression. All the kind of things that you would expect from a Dragon Age game. But in a major departure from the previous series, you will have less direct control over your companions, especially in combat. You will still have some control, but not to the extent of previous games where you essentially just had companions that you could be. And all of this comes with no shortage of disappointment for former Dragon Age players, which I do not believe will be assuaged until you actually get your hands on the game and find it to be fun. I don't think any amount of reveals are going to make that seem good until you actually get to play it, because we're so used to certain ways of playing the game. But all of that doesn't mean that they're going to be simple AI companions or mercenaries either. Instead, you'll be able to pause and direct them in-game utilizing their 5 core abilities, each companion having 5 core abilities. Abilities which can be altered and changed with each companion's skill tree, as well as gear specific for each companion, giving plenty of RPG customization to each one. From an interview over on RPG's site, it sounds like their skill trees will be significantly smaller than your main characters will be, with most of the decisions coming along the way of adding mechanical changes to each companion's core 5 abilities. The trees themselves are organized around these abilities. So this does show that yes, there will be involvement with how you interact with your individual companions, and I'm hopeful, although I haven't seen anything to this, that there'll be other ways to do this, because we already got to see a little bit like deciding which companion you take with you, and you had to split off in the gameplay trailer, but deciding between 2 different ones. So I hope there's plenty of other non-combat related decisions like that really bring home that you and your companions are a team and you get to work together and you have some control as the player, as not just your main character Rook, but also of the companions and how you interact with the world. Still, I think set your expectations for something a bit more autonomous for your companions than what you might have expected for a Dragon Age game, where you had to do a lot or set up lots of tactics and things like that. In fact, as one reviewer described it from Rock Paper Shotgun when they got to experience the first 45 minutes of the game shown to people at Summer Game Fest, Dragon Age: The Veilguard is more a single character action RPG plus entourage than a party-based affair. Baldur's Gate 3, this is not. Dragon Age Origins, this is not. Dragon Age Origins hasn't really existed since, well, Dragon Age Origins. But it sounds like it's even a departure from games like Inquisition as well. So if you're looking for more of the CRPG part of it, that CRPG part, this might not be the game that you've been hoping for. And that sucks. But there are a lot of other great CRPGs out there like Solasta, which I am really getting into and enjoying lately. And of course, the big ass elephant in the room, Baldur's Gate 3, which is just phenomenal. But it's not all bad there either, because the same reviewer over at Rock Paper Shotgun goes on to describe the game as being somewhat like Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 is widely regarded as one of the best RPGs ever made, and perhaps in a lot of ways BioWare at its best. And that's saying a lot because BioWare throughout its history has made some incredible RPGs. From Jade Empire to the first two Baldur's Gate games, they've done a lot. They've done awesome things. And Mass Effect 2 is an incredible game in its own right. And I think that's kind of what we're getting to here. A kind of a assimilation of Dragon Age into Mass Effect. At least that's how it's looking, especially when it comes to companions. And those companions themselves, well, we know a little bit about each of their personalities and their roles and how you're going to interact with them. So let's get to know them a little bit and see who you want to start thinking about bringing with you on your party, who you want to consider romancing. Because yes, of course, it's a BioWare game. It's gonna have romance. I think that would be the part that would have caused the most pitchforks if they had not included very, very in-depth romances. Although for Baldur's Gate 3 fans, I don't think there's gonna be any bears. Or swinging genitalia, though we will have nudity. Our companions start with the first one we're introduced to in the gameplay reveal, Lace Harding, a dwarven scout who we know from Dragon Age Inquisition as the lead scout who provides information to the Inquisitor. Please don't hold it against her that you first find her in the hinterlands.
Herald of Andraste. I've heard the stories. Everyone has. We know what you did at the breach. Everyone's a little nervous around mages right now, but you'll get no backtalk here. That's a promise. Inquisition Scout Harding, at your service. All of us here, will do whatever we can to help.
Harding, huh? Ever been to Kirkwall's Hightown?
I can't say I have. Why?
You'd be Harding and... No, never mind.
Ugh.
They are a side character who left an outsized impression, apparently not just on players, but BioWare as well, as she has been upgraded to a full-on companion and has taken front and center role in marketing for the game so far. She is described by BioWare as a companion with a big heart, a positive outlook, a ready bow, and unexpected magical powers. The magical powers part is particularly interesting given the lore of Dragon Age and the fact that, well, dwarves can't actually use magic in the game. I'm reminded of a very sad, or at least bittersweet quest that you had in Dragon Age Origins, where there was a dwarf who really, really wanted not necessarily to just like be a mage, but be around magic. And you had the opportunity, if you wanted to kind of help them get to the Circle of the Magi with or without approval. It was one of those quests that was just a side quest, but it left you with like thoughts and feelings of, you know, how that character would interact. Just imagining being so engrossed in something and being unable to do it. I think it's something that a lot of us are able to, you know, kind of commiserate with. But I'm getting off track because we're just talking about companions and now I'm reminiscing about old side quests. But what interests me most about this beyond the storytelling potential is how this magic use will impact Scout Harding's abilities, because you get 5 of them, and I'm assuming that some of them will have something to do with magic given this, or they can be enhanced later as you progress in the game. We'll just have to see. Our next companion we get to see in the gameplay reveal as well, Neve. They make quite the entrance with a frost spell, and she is referred to by Varric as the best detective he's ever known. She makes use of her magical powers to devastating effect as you try to foil Solus in the opening scenes. She's a skilled ice mage in a game where we've been assured that elements will have impact beyond just looking, well, cool. Here's hoping that they really bring that home, because I still have very fond memories of playing Dragon Age Origins and using both the combination of ice spells and earth spells to shatter enemies. Largely because other people told me to, because it flew over my head that was a thing that you could combine and do. And when it worked, it was great. And when it didn't work, my party died. BioWare describes Neve as a cynic fighting for a better future as a private detective and member of Tevinter's rebellious shadow dragons. The cynic part is kind of interesting, given that she's fighting for a very noble cause, trying to end slavery in Tevinter, which, if you want to learn a bit more about Neve before playing the game, she and Varric are part of the comic books The Missing, which you can get in a single paperback on Kindle, which I've linked down below if you want to grab it. But now, let's move on to the old man. Emmerich, the companion for everyone who pined for withers. Well, that's probably going to be their next obsession.
Thou walkest alone. On all these harsh nights, thou hast sought no company.
Go have fun with that. But also one of the characters I'm probably most likely to bring along with me because their title is the Necromancer, and they have an undead servant called Manfred. It's like 2 for the price of 1. They are a human Tevinter mage that is part of the Mourn Watch, a group that are the keepers and maintainers of the dead. We don't know much else about Emmerich, which is actually going to be a bit of a theme through some of these other companions. Starting with Davrin, our link to the Grey Wardens, and one that is described as a bold and charming monster hunter. Like Emmerich, we're kind of short on details on Davrin right now, and that's all despite the fact that Davrin was one of the first voices that we heard of the companions ages ago. But we do know a bit more about their faction, of course. Grey Wardens have been present in Dragon Age since the very beginning. So at the very least, we know Davrin had a very strong drink once and a very bad hangover. If you know, you know. But perhaps most importantly, we do have a name for Davrin's griffin, and it's Asan. And yes, you can pet Asan. Our next companion is probably the one that had the absolute worst introduction. That's Balara.
We're going into the Fade, aren't we?
Balara was the one in the hero shooter-esque style trailer we got with the overly comical leap out of the Fade and the tentacles pulling her back in. But her title alone was kind of intriguing, as Balara the Elven Rogue is known as the Veil Jumper. There's not much more known about her except that BioWare describes her as a creative and romantic Veil Jumper who is obsessed with uncovering ancient secrets. And this is where it gets a little bit weird, because in one source she has been referred to as an Elven Rogue, and in another source she has been referred to as a mage, like Neve. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that plays out, but I'm assuming that we're going to have a bit of a different approach to Balara, and perhaps one a bit more related to how like Harding's approach might be. Can't wait to see how that plays out as far as the dynamics of the character and how they approach the game. Tash is probably the character we know least about, and they're probably going to be pretty badass, despite the silliness of their introduction. And honestly, that's kind of becoming a theme with this breakdown, and making me wish we had a bit of a better companion trailer. Tash is a Qunari dragon hunter who's allied with the Lords of Fortune, a group of treasure hunters. And Tash is also the companion we know just about the least about, but it's probably pretty damn clear that she's gonna be a warrior. Lucanus is the character possibly making the most people swoon in the vein of Astarion, which is fitting given that through Dragon Age's history, characters from the Antivan Crows, of which Lucanus is, have always been fairly well received. Lucanus Delamort is a human rogue of the secretive group with shades of Zevran. Like Neve, if you want to learn a bit more about Lucanus before the game, there's actually some literature for it. I've linked that below as well, and it's called Tevinter Nights. Now that you've met the companions, you'll probably be asking the next question that comes to mind with a BioWare game. Who can you romance? And the answer is pretty straightforward. It's everyone. You can romance everyone. All 7 companions will not only be romanceable, but are also canonically pansexual. Essentially, your character's gender won't impact who you want to romance, providing the player with plenty of choice. But that means the companions will have choice as well. Remember that they're going to have a bit more autonomy? Well, there is apparently the possibility that these characters you don't romance will end up together, or with others within the world itself. Just another approach to companion characters that fully fleshes them out beyond your own actions. And yes, for those wondering, especially for those planning to stream the game, there will be sex scenes, there will be varying levels of spicy, and there will be nudity. So just be aware of that. But it's perhaps the next part of the interview that I am the most excited about when it comes to companion and character development, because it's one of the parts of games like this that often gets a little bit muddled. Friendships, of course. BioWare has strived to make friendships just as compelling as romances. So rejoice, friends, just because you're not banging the whole party you still have rewarding and fulfilling platonic relationships you can build them with, as well as your less than platonic relationship with, I don't know, Withers Part 2. With the advancement of romances in RPGs, other aspects at times haven't advanced as far, and friendships are one of those, especially when it comes to potential romantic partners in RPGs. Those ones whose stories sometimes feel like they abruptly end or lock out of any further narrative when you don't proceed with it. This was specifically mentioned in Eurogamer article where Epler stated, "You need to get to know a person before you can really build that kind of relationship with them. And if you choose not to build a romantic relationship, we never want to feel like you're being cut off. There's no, okay, well, their arc isn't progressing. I'm done." And that's music to my ears. I don't want to hear that because I picked option A and not option B, I'm missing out on a lot of character development. Character development is so important in these games because they are very often driven not just by the overarching narrative and story, but by the characters themselves. Now, of course, none of this is revolutionary. Specifically around companions, this is a lot of the same stuff we've seen before in various different games, from Mass Effect to Baldur's Gate. And on the subject of Baldur's Gate, I am not expecting this game to rise to that level of Baldur's Gate, because Baldur's Gate 3 has just exceeded so many expectations. I don't really want to compare any game to it at this point. It stands above. But if this can bring back a little bit of what BioWare has been known for over the years, and bring back a little bit of joy when it comes to seeing a BioWare game instead of abject fear and anxiety, I think most of us will just be happy, right? My name is Trevor Flynn. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. If you want to see my reaction to the trailer, I did that over here to see my anxiety just kind of melt away. It's also currently my most disliked video on this channel, so that's cool.